I want us to put a bow on Micah Parsons really quickly.
Yeah.
And I suggest that I would say that Albert and I both wrote very different things. I got into a little bit of trouble. I guess I made some ageist references to Jerry Jones, and but I will say
Did
this:
you get some backlash over that?
I got a little backlash, but I think the one thing that was not funny about it, because I'm trying to be nicer, but the whole premise of the column was centered around it's time to take the keys away from grandpa. He can't drive the car anymore.
Yeah.
And that has become like an off the record thing with agents now. I've seen like a couple of agents give interviews and they're like, it's time to take the keys away. And I was like, I guess somebody's reading, you know?
Yeah.
We had to go through that recently. And so I'm just familiar with that process.
Yeah.
Um,
I actually I can relate to like we're I would say like I'm just more nervous about my parents driving at night now. It would probably
yeah,
be the way I would put it. Like I'm fine with them driving during the day. It's like my wife is very sensitive to that, where she's like when they come over for dinner, because they live about an hour away, she's like, we probably should just be careful about like having them drive after like 8 o'clock.
my grandpa, until the day he died, had no straightforward vision, only peripheral, could only see out of the corners of his eyes, and still drove to the racetrack every day to bet on the ponies.
Man,
Absolute
that's
legend.
commitment right there. Love it.
But, but you know, so I and you tell me where I'm wrong. So here's the process, right? And maybe it's just that I don't want to revisit my own reaction to it, whatever. I had a very vitriolic reaction to this. And what the day 5 reaction to it now
Yeah.
is this idea that like, well, it was going to be really, really expensive, and no team that has this many
Yeah.
expensive guys is going to win. Here's my rebuttal to that. And then I'm going to hand you the floor. He dicked around with every single one of these guys' contracts. And if he paid Dak Prescott early, and if he paid CeeDee Lamb early, he could have paid Micah Parsons, and this wouldn't have been the disaster scenario
And
that
it
we're
finally
looking
blew up
at.
in his
And
face.
it
Right.
blew up in his face. And for the Cowboys to use that and to throw up their hands and say, whoa, 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 well, this is an issue because it costs too much. You knew that the whole time. And you knew it before the draft when you could have maximized your leverage for the trade. And you knew it after the draft. You knew it at every single step of the way that you're doing this. And you thought, and for Jerry to throw up his hands and say, I thought we had a deal done. I don't understand how this works. You've been the owner of an NFL team for what, like 40 years? I mean,
Yeah.
come on. This is like,
So
to me, this thing is so inexcusable. And I think that the effort to hold this man's pants up after he got completely embarrassed is laughable. But maybe I'm wrong, but I thought this was Khalil Mack level embarrassing on steroids. The Jets got more for Jamal Adams than the Cowboys got for freaking Micah Parsons. Can you believe that?
yeah, so I would agree with you on the front end of it, right? Like, so I 100% like think the way the Cowboys have been negotiating with these guys has, I think antagonized a lot of guys, has created an environment where guys, um, you know, like basically like hold it against the team the way that they've been handled, and it's affected like negotiations on the periphery of that. And so I'm with you on that part of it. The front end of it was completely screwed up. They didn't need to go through the whole process of putting him through the one-on-one negotiation without involving one of the most powerful agents in football and David Mulugheta. All that was asinine. I will say there's one thing I do like. I just think like, and this is just based on my reporting on it. I think what people aren't focusing enough on that would be the best defense of the Cowboys here and the way that they handle this was after that first set of negotiations fell apart in April, they sat down and they talked big picture about, okay, what are we doing here? And I think they took a very real look in the mirror as far as, is the way that we've done business here working?
Right.
And like they've talked a lot, like you've heard Shoddy use the term, like, we want to create the greatest culture in professional sports. Maybe that's a little over the top, but you get the idea of what he's trying to do there. And Micah, by all accounts, has not been the best locker room guy. And in defense of Micah, like a lot of great pass rushers are different or weird or like a little like just a little off, right? Like that's something that for one reason or another is just endemic to the position. So they sit down and they have this conversation about what we want to do and what we want to be. And over the course of those conversations, they really said, like, let's lean in to what Shadi's trying to build here. Let's try to make this more about, let's see what happens if we really try to change like the environment in our locker room, where forever and ever and ever they've done a great job of drafting great players, and they've been as good as anybody when it comes to that over the last 20 years.
Sure.
But they've always had these kind of sideways locker rooms, right? So like, let's see if we do it a little bit differently. And I think the evidence of that, of that plan, is right there in the trade with who they asked for. They asked for Kenny Clark. And I can tell you for a fact, the Packers were a little surprised by it, right? Like, oh, you didn't ask for Rashawn Gary. You didn't ask for Lucas Van Ness. You didn't ask for the younger defensive tackle who's got a lot of potential, Devontae Wyatt. You asked for Kenny Clark. And then when you continue those conversations with the Packers people, what they would tell you is, we were kind of heartbroken that they asked for him, because we knew we were going to do it, but we hate to let him go because he's the best pro we have. He's the best leader we have. We know exactly we know exactly what to expect from him on a day-to-day basis. And that's why the Cowboys asked for him. Like that's why the Cowboys, that was the player they wanted. And so that's what I think they've effed this thing up from the beginning with the negotiation, the way they handled it, the way they antagonized Micah and his agent, all that different stuff. That's 100% on. But I think like the conversations they had after that are actually pretty valid. And having those discussions about like big picture, what are we trying to become here? Because they haven't been to an NFC championship game in 29 years. And that's the second longest drought in the sport when it comes to that, behind the Dolphins and the Browns, who, by the way, like when this streak started, that Browns team is actually the Ravens now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's actually like that streak is actually like, I mean, it's actually one franchise, because the Browns were an expansion team in 99. So it's actually the Dolphins are the only team with a longer drought. And if you think about it, like I looked this up, it's a weird thing that I think the Cowboys are top 7 or 8 in wins over that period. Yet they have the second longest drought of making it to the Final Four. What does that tell you?
So
isn't that a weird?
Okay.
Isn't that weird that they're like top quarter of the league, top 25% of the league in wins over that period? Yet they're, as far as making it to a conference title game, they've got the second longest drought. So like they look at that as there was something a little uneven here, and we need to change something. And I do think there is again, like they wanted to re-sign Micah Parsons, but failing that, I think there's something else they're leaning into here that's relatively significant.
Can you blame me? And I'm not saying this on your end. I'm saying this on the end of, because I think you had the best and kind of most nuanced take of anyone on this. But can you blame me for feeling like I'm being a little spin cycled here? Because for a couple reasons, right?
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
If you all of a sudden decided, we need to stop the run. We're not a run stopping team.
I think the culture thing was a bigger piece of it.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. And Tyler Booker
they won't say that. They won't say that because that is taking a shot at Micah. You know what I mean? Like that. But I mean, I think it's the reality of it.
And drafting Tyler Booker.
And I'm not taking a shot at Micah either, because again, like I think when in a lot of cases when you have great players, you have to manage stuff like that, right? And Micah is such a great player that I think like you would be willing to manage a lot of different things. But like, I think what station are the Cowboys at versus what station the Packers are at, right? Like, and I just think they're two different situations, you know?
And in fairness to that take, I think drafting Tyler Booker and Donovan Ezeraku it fits with that, right? Those are two high character guys from good programs, you know, stuff like that. Okay. But to say that you are now concerned about stopping the run, you didn't draft a defensive tackle until the 10th round or the 7th round in the 2025 draft. You drafted a defensive lineman in the 2nd round of the 2024 draft and then the 7th round. And then you had Maisie Smith, who just, it just hasn't worked out to this point in time. That to me smacks of, okay, you're just trying to find something. And also you're handing a conference opponent, an elite player that's going to make a team that was probably an 8 or 9 win team, if we're being real, the Packers, and turning them into a 10 and possibly 11 win team. Can you really do anything with a 25th overall pick?
And that's the thing about it. Like, I do like look at that piece of it as like, okay, like that's like that's a very valid like look at that situation, because you did make that team better, and that pick is probably going to be worse as a result of it. And if it is a 25th, 26th, 27th pick, that's obviously way different than like if you're getting the 15th pick or the 10th pick in the draft. Like, they're two different animals, but it does give you more flexibility. It does give you more that you can do, and you can move around some with extra picks. And I don't know. Again, I just think that they had gotten to a point with Micah, with his relationships in that locker room, and with like the issues with Micah weren't going to get fixed in Dallas. They just weren't going to get fixed in Dallas. And like, he's established and is of his way. And, the one coach who was really able to reach him there and get him to play consistently on a down-to-down basis and play within the defense was actually Dan Quinn, who, like, that's one reason why I think there were people in that organization that wanted to move on from Mike McCarthy and go to Dan Quinn while Quinn was still there, because Quinn had done such a good job of being able to, reach different guys that were really hard to reach in the roster. And it was just going to be harder to do that. It was going to be harder to turn him based on everything that was happening here. Whereas when he goes to Green Bay now, what they're betting on, and having talked to people there, because they know all of this too, but what they're betting on is like, we've got really great young leadership in our locker room. One thing that's like a really interesting thing to look at with them, actually, if you want to flip this to the Packer side of it, is like, they had heard some stuff about like how things weren't perfect with Xavier McKinney and with the Giants, right? And they basically made the bet that we're going to be able to reach Xavier McKinney and we're going to be able to do more with him. And when he comes into our locker room and is around our defensive leadership and is around our guys and in this small town environment, like, we're going to be able to maximize him.
Yeah.
And then he was one of the best safeties in football last year.
Right.
So the Xavier McKinney signing of 2024 actually kind of gives them a blueprint for how we're going to try to get the most out of Micah Parsons.
Football is back, and Underdog is the best place to make picks and win money all season long. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like touchdowns, receiving yards, interceptions, or more. Guys, it's one of those things where some of these places can be so intimidating. You feel like you have to know so much about it, but Underdog is easy to find app. Just download it and you can jump right into the game with no pretenses, no precursors, just picking higher or lower on stats. It's so simple. It's so intuitive. My friends love it. It's a way that we can kind of communicate and talk about what we're doing each week on Underdog. And this week, I'm looking at Joe Burrow and taking him for higher than 2 touchdowns, and Malik Neighbors higher for 6 catches. Everyone's fading Malik Neighbors right now. Giants are going to be trailing in the second half of so many of these games. I think that that's a great look. Download the app today and sign up with promo code MMQB to score $50 in bonus funds when you play your first $5. That's promo code MMQB. Millions of fans have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Will you be next? Underdog. Make picks. Win money.
Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/web/play and get terms _DFS_.html for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
And Micah too. I mean, he was in State College. I don't think that this is a
Right. I think
foreign.
that's part of it. Yeah. Like
I don't think that's a foreign
right.
environment for him in Green Bay.
Right.
So my other two things are this, and then let's talk about some actual football. Is so that if you had this, the character thing too is an interesting thing, right? Where if there's a backbone issue with character, and by the way, you mentioned the Packers. It's almost like how you said because Brian Dable and Kevin O'Connell wanted Drake May, the Patriots were not going to trade that pick.
Right.
If the most free agent averse team in the NFL who brought in Reggie White and Charles Woodson want my player, I'm probably not giving it to them for two for 2 first-round picks and a 30-year-old defensive tackle. That's just me. I don't know. It probably scares me a little bit. But I do wonder again, it's like all these things now that are coming out, if you felt that way, and I'm sure Kenny Clark is a great guy, you could have gotten a high character guy that's like 27 if you traded him before the draft. Like that. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Like,
and I think that to me is like the most fair criticism is
like if you wanted all these things,
is you absolutely could have moved him. Now, I mean, we know this year's draft wasn't a great draft. The 25 draft wasn't seen as a great draft. So maybe it winds up working out for them in the end. But that's why it's like generally hard to get value for like real value for a guy if you're trading him in August. You know what I mean? Like I almost feel like you have to create that tension with the player. If you're even having like even if it's like a 5% chance in your head that you're going to deal him, like I almost feel like you have to create that tension point with the player before the draft for the good of the franchise. Because like when you get to the end of August, teams' budgets are set, their cap is set, their rosters are set. They're going to be less likely to give you a king's ransom than if you like create a bidding war in March or April. And then on the flip side, I like the post-trade part of it, you're actually going to get a player that you can use this year, and you're going to know what pick you're trading for. Like they have no idea what picks they're trading for and getting picks in 26 and 27. Now they might be able to guess, but they don't know. Whereas like if you had made this trade back in April, you know exactly what pick you're getting, at least for the current year.
This spins perfectly into the fact that like the Dallas Cowboys have to play a game in 2 days. And, if I saw CeeDee Lamb, the clip of CeeDee Lamb saying, "Oh yeah, there's a chip on our shoulder, and we're hearing about how everybody's talking about us and blah 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 blah." I can't imagine. It's probably hard to imagine that this team's like ready to go right now. I think that Vegas is betting on that. The Eagles are like 8.5 point favorites.
Are they really? Okay.
Yeah.
Was that number lower last week? I'm assuming it was, right?
I'm sure it had to be.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. So this is the ESPN bet sportsbook, and I'm not advocating for using any sportsbook, but I'm just letting you know that that's what this is.
Unless that
minus 7.5. Oh, for sure. Yeah, you want to get in? Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, minus 7.5. So, I mean, you tell me. But I mean, this game, I'm going to be watching for how the Eagles, because you had mentioned the retooled defense. I think that's what's interesting to me. We brought up the fact that Vic Fangio a year ago, and I think in hindsight now, will say that, maybe trying to be a little bit too complicated, trying to be a little bit over everybody's head those first couple weeks. What happens now that Cooper DeJean has evolved into a player who can probably help run point on this defense? Jalen Carter gets another year in the system. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but I love the idea that we kind of know what the offense is going to look like. It's going to be hard for Kevin Patullo, I think, who's a future head coach in my mind, but it's going to be hard for him to put his stamp on things immediately, I would guess.
Yeah.
You kind of have to let Jalen Hurts run point guard in this offense, but I'm really excited to see what this defense looks like against Dallas. I mean, the Cowboys are still a formidable offense. Anytime you have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and George Pitt, like, you're going to be able to make plays and you're going to be able to move the ball. But this would be a good showcase for them, I think, to kind of, see where they're at and see if they can get off the ground a little bit quicker as a defense. Because if they can be where they were at like week 10 and it's week 2 or 3, I mean, look out.
And that's that again, like, it's a hard ask because like they did, and I think I told you, like, you referenced that story that I had from my personal experience. Like, I was kind of like taken aback by how much they've lost on defense, which I didn't really remember it that way, from March, but like losing Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Darius Slay and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, like there's a fair amount of outgoing talent there. Brandon Graham didn't play as big a role, but obviously he was a really important leader for them, So, I think like they're going to be looking for some young guys in some key spots to make plays for them. And don't forget, like last year they started 2-2, and, you mentioned like it didn't look great the first few weeks of the season. It did take them some time to get off the ground with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. So now they have a new offensive coordinator and they have some personnel change on defense. So are they able to start faster than they did a year ago? That part of it's going to be really interesting to me. And then I'm fascinated to see what the Cowboys do to generate a pass rush, because we'll all be really honed in on that. I think like we're all going to be really paying attention to that. And Matt Eberflus comes over. He was in Dallas before, and now he's going to get a chance to. He's gonna get a chance to put in his scheme, and those players there are now on their third defense in 3 years. Because those guys went from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer to now Eberflus. So what does that look like? And I certainly think there's going to be pressure on Donovan Azaraku and Sam Williams and Dante Fowler, guys that they're going to put out there on the edge, because obviously anytime there's a trade like this, you're circling that position that was vacated. And, we could talk about the Micah Parsons thing until we're blue in the face, but we all know there was one thing that he did at a higher level than maybe anybody else on the planet. And we'll see if the Cowboys can come close to approximating any of that with the number of guys that they have. Because don't forget, they also lost to Marcus Lawrence.
Right.
So this is sort of a reset for them at that position.
It reminds me of when John Gruden played the Bears the first time after the Khalil Mack trade. And I watched that game. It was in London. And I think they triple teamed Khalil Mack for like the majority of the game with the unsaid part being, this guy's not going to get a sack against us. Make us look stupid. And so I do wonder if the directive to Matt Eberflus was like, if you don't wind up with 5 sacks, like, or, get to Jalen Hurts a couple times and you'll find a few gold bricks in your locker after the coach's locker after the game. I don't know. I mean, I do think that there's that part of it, and there is certainly some concern there.